In this episode, I am joined by Katarina Falkenberg and Tommy Westlund, alchemists, practitioners of Western Esotericism, and authors of Alchemy, the Divine Work. Katarina and Tommy recount the history of Western alchemy from Egypt through ancient Greece, the Islamic Golden Age, Renaissance Europe to today, and consider critiques of alchemy as mere proto or indeed pseudo-science. Katarina and Tommy reveal the language of the birds, the hidden language of symbol and intuition used among initiated practitioners. They detail the stages of inner transformation that the alchemist ascends in his quest for spiritual evolution and compares them to the stages of other meditative traditions. Katarina and Tommy also discuss today's changing cultural mores around masculinity and femininity, and their implications for the metaphors used by the alchemical tradition to express polarity and the union of opposites. So without further ado, Katarina Falkenberg and Tommy Westlund. Katarina Falkenberg and Tommy Westlund, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm so delighted to be talking with you both today to discuss your life and work, and also your recently published Alchemy, the Divine Work, published for the first time in the English language. And what an achievement it is. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Now, I wonder if you might say something about this book, Alchemy, the Divine Work, how it came to be and what its significance is.
Okay. It came into being in various stages. We had no idea or intention to write a book like this. We started to, we have always written, the two of us, separately, and we started to write articles for a period we had in Swedish, and we started also to work with workshops in alchemy and various other traditions. So we had to write things for the workshops, and over the years it grows. So we realized we can actually compose a book from all of those articles, and we composed that first book many years ago. We were extremely happy and satisfied. That was a book of 150 pages, and then we said, okay, this is the book we now can offer for workshops and courses. But it lacked many things, we realized quite early on. So, and you obviously realize when someone has written a book and when someone has written 15 articles and put as separate chapters in a book, there is no true coherence. It's no true fluency in it. So we rewrote everything, and in 2015 we were extremely happy to send the book to the printer. And I remember we were in my house then. We smoked cigars, had whiskey, as you always need to do when you send an alchemy book to print. And that night I woke up like 15-20 times, just realizing, oh, I need to change that. Oh, that was the wrong order of things. And that book was really good in a way, but we completely rewrote everything. So it was like 450 pages, and we didn't keep anything. We rewrote everything based upon all the experiences we had gained through over the years working together with courses, and that eventually came out in 2018 in Swedish, and we felt that this is the everything we have to offer. And then the English translation started, and we noticed a few lacunas, so we had to include some new 60 pages or something. And now it's completed for now. But it's been an ongoing process for actively writing the book, 10 years at least.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. And the work we did before, since 2005, has laid the foundation for it.
Fascinating. And I understand there was
an initiative to have it translated into English, and that project, it ended up becoming its own great work, in a sense.
Indeed.
Yeah, because so many people were contacting us, and they wanted to read it, and they started even to try to learn Swedish to read the book. And then a esoteric group started to translate, and in the end it was 2 persons left, Chase and Derek. So yeah.
And obviously they were fluent in esoteric language. They had to learn the language of the birds to understand the play of words that we used in the Swedish edition, and try to first understand that, and then we together with them try to do similar things in the English, more profane language.
Okay, you've used the first cool alchemical term, language of the birds.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yes, you can say that the alchemical language is metaphors, but it's also, the audio language. So when you say something, it can seem like a bird whispering or singing, and then you can interpretate it into alchemical symbols. So it's a quite intuitive language, you can say. And it's Fulcanelli, also the famous alchemist, who said that we have to talk the language of the birds. And what do you say about the language of the birds?
Yeah, like you said, and it's also a play on words where you sometimes, as alchemy, as all Gnostic traditions, require you to study and work to unveil the deeper understanding. You can write something extremely simple and plainly, but then you won't understand that this is an important key. But if you play with words, so for example, sea and tree, to words that are used extremely much in alchemical symbolism, just because the English words sounds very similar, you can see that they have a relationship. And many of the poems that we have written and various stuff we have translated from, especially the old German alchemists, love to play on words. So they wrote a word and it's pronounced like another word. And obviously for us today, we don't really know that, because that word has been out of use since the 1600s. So we have to dig deep into the old old books to understand that, this word that actually means this sounds like that, and that means the royal oak, which in alchemy is significant when you have to produce the salt or something like that. So we wanted to keep with the alchemical tradition, and that's the way we teach also. We never aim to speak in we always aim to speak the truth, but the truth has to be clothed in illustrations and symbols, so that it's not only taken as the exact meaning of the word, but you understand the bigger concept and context of it.
Yeah, and you can also say that because of you want to speak to the heart or to your soul. So if you use the language of the birds, you go beyond the intellect and go beyond feelings to get to this, soul language or heart language. That's also why.
It's very interesting. When we talk later about the history of alchemy, I think we'll see that it has, in your presentation, been around a long time and traveled through different cultures. Yes. Egypt to Greece to the Islamic world, and so on. And one thinks of those cultures as having quite different sets of symbols and quite different sets of, I suppose, gods and goddesses and that sort of thing. On the other hand, one could see them as having some sort of continuity or relationship. Is it necessary when you speak to the heart with this language of birds that the person you speak to has a certain cultural background? Is it necessary that they share the same source of symbolic references, even perhaps latently, that you're using in the language of the birds? Could somebody from a very different place or a very different time still be reached with the language of the birds? Or does it require a kind of rooting in this winding tradition of symbols and so on, going back through so many different cultures and also through so many different languages?
I think you can reach people from every culture because it's a Pan-Sophic tradition. But then when you start to study and try to understand alchemy, then it's good to, we are working in the Western tradition, but we can also work in Eastern tradition. And then it's good to have your background. But primarily it's a tradition that is Pan-Sophic and goes beyond all cultures, languages and everything, I would say.
Yes, I agree. And I think the one of the things that make alchemy differs from many of the other esoteric traditions and religions is that most esoteric traditions and religions are based upon one person that meditates or performs a ritual and has this huge experience or this state of consciousness, and then trying to understand that, trying to explain it, and trying to learn it to other people. So this one person becomes like the guru and is the main deciphering person of the tradition. Whereas alchemy is based since time primordial of observing nature and studying nature and learning to mirror nature and see how the world outside of us is a mirror of the world within us. And regardless of where we're living in this world, we all, I mean, even in New York, you could say that you have some kind of nature. We all can study the stars. We can see the meditate upon the sun. We can see the spring coming. We know experience the heat of the summer and the decay of the fall and the death in the winter. So in many of the countries in the world, there are at least 2, 3, or 4 seasons. And alchemy is based upon the interpretation of how these seasons and the nature going from birth to life to death, decay to rebirth, how that's a cycle of life, and that unites all of us regardless of skin color, regardless of religious belief or non-religious belief. We can all observe the same phenomenon. And the only thing alchemy teaches is that we can integrate that and we can see how that is mirrored within us. Then whether we want to do this from a religious perspective, where we in the Western tradition use Christian symbolism, but also Greek symbolism, Egyptian symbolism, or you want to do it from a Wicca tradition or from the Eastern practices, etc. That doesn't matter, because the blueprint is nature. The other religious ideas are just way to interpret and to mediate this inward or outward going experience with your own belief system.
Fascinating, thank you. Katarina, you used the word intuition. There's an intuitive aspect of to the language of birds. And I think sometimes alchemy is often seen, we'll look at popular ideas about alchemy, and you point to some of them in your book and correct some of those misconceptions. Sometimes I think alchemy is seen as poring through old texts in Latin or Arabic, whatever the case may be, and finding catalogues of correspondences between symbol and meaning, or a string of symbols perhaps, element, God, quality, etc. And then perhaps there's some application of that. So what's the balance between an intuitive working with the language of the birds, with symbols and so on, and a studied looking for in grimoires and so on, fixed catalogued correspondences?
I think it's good to do both, because it's a tradition that you have to go into yourself, into the mystery of being a human, into the mystery of God. But it's also good to have this logos aspect, that you know the tradition, you know the ones that has been working before you, you know the old texts. So for us, I think it's both. We say it's Sophia. You have to experience, you have to do it in creative processes, but it's also logos, and you have to know your tradition. And when you combine them, you have this good light within, that when you combine the light of Sophia and the light of logos, you have this primordial light. And that's the same with alchemy, I think. So you have to both feelings and intellect, and both above and below, and both masculine and feminine, and also intellect and imagination. And when you combine them, you have a good foundation to proceed in alchemy, I think. At least it's our way.
It is, and you could see that some of this means that has been used and utilized for so long, so it's part of the it has become part of the archetypical world. Like today, it's Friday, right? Yeah, it is Friday, which obviously from the Nordic tradition is the day of Freya, and from the Hermetic tradition is the day of Venus. And we are definitely embracing that it is both Freya and Frey, and it's the day of Venus. It's the day of love. It's the day when we don't have to work any longer if we have a 5-day working week. And that doesn't say that Friday is Venus, but people have utilized the resemblance between Friday and Venus for extremely long time, from the Grimoire tradition and much longer before that. So alchemy is also the art of understanding the archetypes and being able to utilize them without having them as a dogma. If we want to make Venus elixir, obviously Friday is a really good day for working with it, but we can obviously embrace Venus love any kind of day.
And it's also, we have had educations for many years in alchemy. And you can also see some people really want to understand, to read, to go by the intellect, by the mind. And then from there, they can go into the intuitive or emotional or ritual. And some people, they just want to know and feel and do rituals and live the tradition. But after a while, then they can go back and come into to study their tradition. So it's both ways, and it's also always mostly a manly or a female way to go into the tradition, I think. Or anyway, it used to be, not anymore. Yeah, I think so. Because I have priestess traditions also, where they want to feel, experience, do it out in life, and then have to push to take the tradition and read and study. And it used to be a more, I have hard work, but now people want to know the tradition because they have to know it, to express it, and also to protect the tradition.
And you said it used to be. Do you mean by that?
Yeah, I realized I said that it used to be because I think people have changed the last 5 years. Yeah, and it's not so because the society have changed in this masculine and feminine and men and women. So I think also when we study the spiritual traditions, people have changed. They want to be, anyway, in our community, they want to have both ways, always, you know, above and below, within and without, the masculine and the feminine. And the goal in alchemy is the hermaphroditic child. So it's an androgyne perspective. So yeah, it's been changing the last 5 years, I would say.
Or you have changed.
Or maybe. Or both.
but I agree. We notice a huge difference in the participants in our workshops and educations. And the males tend to come in with a more intuitive way, and the females come with a more outspoken intellectual understanding.
I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on this change in the last 5 years. Do you have further thoughts or perhaps even speculations about that change? What's caused it? What are its characteristics? What are its implications?
Since it was a revelation to ourselves right now, so it's just speculations. But I think we have had this Me Too movement, when we see differently on being a man and being a woman. I think that has been the first step to this change. And also, of course, this pandemic, when people are, going behind the surface and going within, and we all are emotion and intellect and female and masculine. So we get more and more in touch with the deeper levels of being a human, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And having worked in Sweden's esoteric scene since the early 1990s, obviously it used to be for a very long time, and I used to work in Stockholm's biggest esoteric bookshop, that the males came and bought the Logos intellectual books, whereas women wanted to have the more, they wanted to emphasize the intuitive and emotional aspect much more. And I think we have come to crossroads now, relating to the things that Katarina said, that the definition of what makes a man and what makes a woman. And we never talk about men and women. We talk about the masculine and feminine principle, and that, like Carl Jung described it, we all have our own anima and animus. We have our own inner masculine and feminine principles. And I think the crossroads now is that they are meeting each other in a different way, and that the idea that a man should be the huge provider and go out and kill animals, etc., is something romantic we see on movies, and the woman is the household provider and takes care of the children. That's also part of the movie tradition more. And regardless of sex, people want to explore themselves and their relationship with the universe and creation, and see the archetypical pattern that has led us to this point where men and women are more equal, although we still have too much work to do also in that respect. But I think the esoteric traditions have to some extent always been forerunners, and we can see that this will have positive implications in society as a whole.
You mentioned that the symbol of alchemism, or alchemy rather, one of the key ideas of alchemy is this androgyne child, and this working with polarities. and opposites and unifying them and so on, and working with them in different ways. And this masculine feminine sort of archetypal duality, drawn from that male female metaphor, which I assume would have been assumed throughout much of human thought. But it seems today there are, you're describing it, changes in what it means to be a man or a woman, or are those categories even really relevant to what it means to be a person? And is that binary all there is? There are theories and ideas now, quite mainstream, I think, that sort of an idea of a binary is not even really worth considering anymore. So I'm curious if you think that has implications for the use of masculine and feminine as a sort of stock symbol for polarities. I mean, it's all through alchemy.
Yeah.
Do you think that there may be a time when that symbol becomes not so effective because that sense of duality, sexually speaking, is less prominent in the minds of a culture? Could that be the case?
I think it can be a new polarity, because we need two powers to get the energy to move on. And, we have the darkness, we have the light, and then we have creation. So I think the polarity in itself is not the problem. It's the battery for life. But I think this male and female polarity can be outdone in the future. And hopefully it will, because it's causing so much problems in this world. If we try to stay with a dogma, and it's not useful anymore. But I think the polarity in itself is a beautiful thing, because when we have the dialogue also, it's also polarity in the philosophical and alchemical tradition. One people say one thing and the other another thing, and then we get together, and then we can have a new revelation. So I think this will go on, but maybe, as you say, the female and male will disappear, and we have a new hermaphrodite and another thing coming together, maybe.
In our book, obviously, alchemy is based upon the realization of the opposites in creation, as fire and water, as heaven and earth, as within and without, as spirit and matter, as the masculine and the feminine. But the more you work with advanced alchemical teachings, and I would dare to say regardless of tradition, you will start to have another duality, which is the human and deity. And then you will have the duality of this universe and the other universes, etc. So every time you have an alchemical marriage where you unite your own anima and animus, your own masculine and feminine, and you unite your above with the below, you unite your spirit with matter, with the body, you have to unite with your holy guardian angel, or your personification of divinity. And from that sense, you unite this universe with the black hole of this universe, etc., etc. So there will always be dynamic opposites for us to realize, purify, integrate, and marry and transcend. But hopefully the idea of male and female being opposites will soon change to the realization that we are humans.
Well, that's interesting. So the principle of polarity is fundamental in alchemy, but the use of the metaphor of male and female, or masculine and feminine, is not fundamental.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. But this is our opinion.
Sure.
Because just because you need a polarity to evolve and to create. So that's why we have to have these principles. But we have to move forward and see what's in the society right now, and what's important to work, and what's important to unite. So it's still important to unite masculine and feminine, and that's why we still work with it, I think. But it's not the end of this evolution or transformation or transmutation to being divine human beings.
Interesting. I'll ask one more question about it, and then we can move on. Tommy, you said hopefully, you hope that this idea of, I think your words were the male and female and masculine and feminine being opposites.
Yes.
Is moved beyond. I'm curious what you mean by that and why you said hopefully.
I think that why I said it hopefully is that and I think we are of the strong belief that we have a masculine and feminine side within us. Every human being does. The problem becomes when society and our belief in archetypes wants to define that this inner aspect must have this outer quality or outer manifestation. And that's part of what entraps and enslaves people throughout history, that we are being taught that you have to behave like this because you are born with this sex. You have to behave like that because you're born with that sex. And I think we can see that here in Sweden just for the last years, that our youngsters have a completely different opinion, where it's completely not only allowed, but it's no problem at all if you have a name that traditionally was defined as a female name or as a male name, and your whole idea that you have to be identified by whether you have a penis or vagina is obsolete. And they are sort of, we can see them growing up with a deep alchemical understanding that it's not the being male or being female, it's being a human person, being able to express both your masculine and your feminine aspects.
And androgyny also.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel that you are.
So why I said hopefully is that here we see that huge trend coming, and I believe that will be something much more common and normal in the ages to come. But we also know that every time something like this happens, we will have a counter reaction from the traditionalists or people with religious or philosophical ideas saying that no, the dogma is like this, a man has to be a man, a woman has to be a woman, and now it's not about a man being allowed to be a woman, we have to teach men to be men, and women has to be taught to be women again, which I see as a counter movement to an inner intuitive transformation taking place, which has just happened to be a true alchemical transformation.
But I also think in the esoteric tradition, we always have this, it's a god and then it's a goddess. And then it's the alchemical union. But it's the same there. We say that it's a polarity, and it can be any polarity. You can have the Egyptian god Anubis together with maybe some solar god, and they are a polarity together and can make an alchemical union. And you can have two female goddesses also and make a union. So I think many people also think that in the esoteric tradition, you have to have this god and goddess, or masculine and feminine, but you don't have to have it at all. And that's important, I think, so many people can feel that they are it's impossible to have a place in this what you say, circles or esoteric traditions or alchemy, and be who you are and find polarities that express your inner polarity, I think.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because it's such a fundamental symbol in alchemy, and throughout your book, it's not the only symbol by any stretch, but it's a common one. And it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that, especially because you had mentioned, Katarina, that you saw things changing in that respect.
Yeah.
That's what prompted this line of questioning. So let's turn to alchemy itself. You point to two common misconceptions in the book about alchemy, and that is that it is a proto-science, a precursor to physical chemistry, that is now therefore outdated and outstripped by our superior understanding of physical chemistry since those days, or it's a pseudo-science, which has been, I suppose, therefore made redundant by real science, I suppose, would be non-pseudo-science. Science, basically. So I'm wondering if you might speak to those two misconceptions, and perhaps, if possible, could you give a short history of alchemy, its origins, and how its methods or goals or emphases have changed as it's proceeded through history over these some thousands of years?
Yeah, and I think the second question will perhaps answer the hopefully the first question. So the history. No.
Move on.
Well, since our main focus is the Western tradition, we obviously acknowledge that the Eastern tradition has a longer alchemical tradition than the West has. It's a longer traceable tradition, but I'm not an expert in that. We focused on the Western tradition, and there we can trace the origins to at least to back to Egypt. And the main thing we have to keep in mind then is that this science with a big capitalized S included both the transformations and transmutations of matter in relationship to divinity. So the art of coloring, the art of coloring was an alchemical art, and they saw that the way we describe it, color is a symbol of the soul aspect. So just being able to color huge sheets or color statues was a divine alchemical work. To make the statues become imbued with the life of divinity, or being hosted by the gods or goddesses it represented. And the ability to work with gold as the most, as almost the blood of the Egyptian gods and goddesses manifested in statues. So we have this very, very long and old tradition, and the meeting point really becomes in Alexandria, where the old goldsmith techniques and the religious beliefs of old Egypt merged and met with the Greek philosophers. And then we see the other huge tradition in alchemy, which is the philosophical idea of being able to speculate the relationship or the components of matter, of man. What is consciousness? What is the divinity? How can man relate to the divine, etc.? So we have all of this meeting in Alexandria, and in the Western world, that's where the oldest alchemical treatises and tractates are from. And they described, like Zosimus described 1800 years ago, that this great art was given to us by the gods. And it was actually the goddess Isis that was being instructed in the art of alchemy by by certain angels, and that art was then being taught in Egypt. And Zosimus stated that therefore it has an Egyptian side to it, and it has a Jewish side to it, as Moses and Maria or Miriam carried out, were both initiated and trained in the alchemical tradition and developed that into the Jewish alchemical tradition. And those traditions merged in Alexandria. So it's a meeting between Egypt, the Greek Hellenistic world of ideas and philosophies, and then it stretched through Europe, through the Islamic world, when early Christianity tried to burn all the books and managed to burn many of the alchemical books and many of the Greek philosophical texts until they were rediscovered, mostly through Arabic translations, because the Arabic culture had really flourished, and not only learned from the Greek philosophers, but also learned from the Greek, Jewish, and Egyptian alchemists, and developed the alchemical teachings and developed the apparatus and the lab techniques very much. And that was brought back into the Christian world in the medieval times, late medieval times, and helped instigating the Renaissance, where the Western world again actually saw that we have not only a past, we have a really interesting past that we need to bring back into life. And well, the rest is a short history.
That's fascinating. And I'm wondering, do you think that the inner, so to say, spiritual inner transformational aspects or implications of alchemy were always a part of it? Or at what point did they come into it? Do you think it was the meeting of the Greek philosophy with metallurgic techniques that link was seen? Or do you think that link between outer manipulation of matter and inner transformation of the person was always implied to some degree? When did that come out, do you think?
I think it's always been together. And during history, they have been separated. So because alchemy in itself is a union between inner and outer. So it's not alchemy if you just do, herbal tinctures or metallurgy. If you only do that, it's not alchemy. And if you only see alchemy as a psychology or inner spiritual tradition, it's not alchemy either, because it's inner and outer together. And in my vision, I see it was more together way back in history, and maybe before all the civilizations also that we now know, the high cultures. So I think it's been, separated during time until this day.
And interestingly, Zosimus wrote 1800 years ago that he was concerned about the split and division of the understanding of alchemy already back then. And he tried to convey the teaching that we work in the laboratory, but what happens there is interesting only in the sense that it reflects the inner transformations and transmutations. And he says that, we work towards the... We want to transform and transmute gold in the outer, but that only happens as a symbol where our soul becomes a mirror for the divine and we become one with the divine. That's the true alchemical meeting, but we need to have this outer projection to understand, to sense in our bodies, to sense in our soul and in the spirit, how to be able to direct currents and forces and bring it back in. Exhale and inhale. And So from the Western part, that has been the opus to make the philosophical gold, where and alchemists have in the Western world always said that that's not vulgar gold. It's not the gold you consider to be gold. This is the philosophical gold. It's the living gold. That's something completely different. Although people can and have mistaken that for vulgar gold. So we can see the Western tradition has had a strong implication towards this gold aspect, whereas Eastern alchemy, they were more interested in the elixir of life, how to cure the human being from illnesses, both from a physical and from a soul and spiritual perspective. And that aspect obviously was reintegrated also in the Western path. But even today, when people hear that we are interested in doing alchemy, no one talks about the elixir of life. They always so can you make gold? And of course we can. We are alchemists.
But I also think it's very, we work a lot with herbal alchemy or spagyrics. So it's very nice, even if you have a strong process in the human alchemy you have all you need inside the human body. But when you work with herbal, it's very educational also to see the process inside and outside. When you do a calcinatio and you burn your old material and people can feel this burning heat with inside and the purification. It's very nice when they walk together, inner and outer. So they are complementary, but for us, it's not either or either, it's both.
And then we come to your question about the proto-science or the pseudo-science. And alchemy has to some degrees been a proto-science because alchemists wanted to explore creation. And wanted to perform the impossible. So they tried out experiments in the laboratory, but they did it from the perspective of wanting to understand creation. They worked with the divine forces. They invoked and prayed to God or to angelic forces. And they saw what happened in their laboratory was an outer reflection of the transformations going on within. And thereby, Isaac Newton was a great alchemist, although he's now considered to be the father of science. But most of his work, and not most, the absolute majority of his work was on alchemy. And that has only been recently published in the last 10 years or something like that, because from the scientific perspective, they were quite embarrassed that this father of science main focus was alchemy. But that's not, for us, that's not difficult to understand. But we also then, if alchemists have been believed to be able to transmute lead to gold or to make the elixir of life, of course that brings people into alchemy that hasn't purified themselves, that have no interest in merging with the divine. They want to, in the best of cases, they have learned certain things and they want to believe it themselves. And if you can make other people believe that I have achieved this, then it's easier for me to believe it as well. Or in the worst case scenario, they just wanted to make money. So the ages are filled with people that have sold the elixir of life in various ways, and that doesn't mean that some of them actually were done by true alchemists in a good fashion, but the idea that we have an elixir that cures all illnesses is perhaps also a metaphor for something else. We can certainly make elixirs that helps us to work with diseases or illnesses or imbalances, but we also have to work with that elixir and have to do at least as much work within ourselves as the actual elixir is supposed to do from without.
You write in the book that one way of seeing modern science is the outer aspect of alchemy, gaining power to influence the outer world without what is essential in alchemy, which is this accompanying inner transformation. They go hand in hand. And you describe it as the alchemist's great fear that people would gain power in the outer world through, I suppose, what we could perhaps would just say is modern science, without linking that increase in power to a more profound spiritual transformation. And in other words, science can be dangerous in the hands of the wrong kind of people. When do you think that diverged? Isaac Newton evidently was pursuing alchemy as well as what we'd think of now as science. I mean, I think it's seen almost, isn't it, that science was among what he was doing, and that's the good bit. And the rest of it was, he didn't know any better.
Yeah.
It's perhaps seen that way. So when did that diverge, and what are its possible implications?
Never, I think. It never diverged, because the problem also with alchemy and the tradition and Newton is that it's been a hidden science or hidden tradition, because it's been, Newton, he was threatened by the church, and so many alchemists have been during time. So I think it never diverged. But when the church or some other institution think, oh, these are only gold making mans doing, puffing or some things that is not for real, or maybe it's for real and we get the money out of it. So it's also a way of hiding the inner mystery, and the inner mystery is the same as in Eastern alchemy. It's the immortal body, the diamond body. And when you work with that, you get a lot of power within you, and that is threatening to institutions and to society. So I think it's also, that's important thing in this idea that it's diverged now or sometime during tradition. It's a way of hiding also.
I agree with that, but also alchemy, since we can, in the Western tradition, then see what Zosimus wrote, that he had problems with people only seeing the outward aspects of alchemy without understanding that it should mirror the inner implications. We have, throughout history for 2,000 years at least, seen how certain alchemists or mystics have only valued the inner transformation, and they disregarded everything outside. And other alchemists and magicians or mystics, they have only focused on the outer transformations and transmutations, and haven't seen the relationship between the inner processes that happens. And for us, that's I know this has happened. I know this happens because people still argue whether the process is within or without, and where we think that it was stated back in the Emerald Tablet of Hermes that if we are alchemists, we have to work with the above and the below, and we have to make them becoming one, and that also entails that the without and the within has to become one. But we have one of the alchemists in Sweden working in the 1700s. He was a lab alchemist, and he was actually the last alchemist employed by the Swedish state to bring gold into the States so Sweden could buy more army equipment and become this huge superpower that people dreamt of in the 1780s. So he was a lab alchemist, and he was working extremely much with gold. He was also working with the inner theosophical tradition, and he's written a wonderful treatise about the inner philosophical stone, which I think, or I know, Adam MacLean translated, or it's on Adam MacLean's webpage. The author is August Nordenskjöld. So he wrote this wonderful piece about the inner spiritual transformation that can take place. But then we also have his diaries and notebooks. So and when he was working with his outer laboratory, and he actually managed to blow up part of his house, he couldn't see the relationship between the outer and the inner. So we have the actual diaries, and his student is complaining that no, we can't increase the fire, you're just being impatient, and so no, we have worked now for a long time, and now it's the time to increase the fire, and everything blow up. And we could see that, oh, he blew up, he went back into the stage of nigredo, the blackest of darkness, where the soul just questions everything, and he cries in his diaries, but he can't see that this is that the outer and the inner didn't resonate with each other. So it's no surprising then that people 2023 or next year 2024, when this will be broadcasted, believe that now alchemy is either it's the inner transformation, now alchemy is the outer manifestation of transmutations and transformations. And no, going back to the sources, it is both. And it's really in this meeting point between the individual and the outer world, or the individual and the collective, where the alchemical opus really manifests itself, where every human has the possibility, as Katarina said, to achieve the impossible, to create and transmute the immortal body of consciousness.
I agree. Not often, but no.
Do you have people sometimes who come to your classes and workshops and courses who really just want one side of it? Oh, I don't want to have to smelt copper and make salt. Can I just do inner transformation practice? Can I work in the inner level somehow? Or do you have people say, oh, I don't want to have to deal with all that. I want to get my Bunsen burner out and so on. Do you have people who lean in one direction and the other quite strongly, or do most people who come to you recognize the importance of this, both the inner and the outer, and want to wed them together?
I think many people that come to us, they don't know why. They have this strong feeling that they should do this, and they don't really know why. So it's not always that they have studied so much alchemy, but we can feel that they have alchemy in their blood from maybe another lifetime, I don't know. And so they are quite open to what we are learning them and what we are doing. But we are quite early in the process. We do this fundamental teaching what alchemy is, and it's within and without. So they, in the beginning, they know what our job is with them in the alchemical education, I think. But I think people are quite wise now. I don't know if it's people coming to us, but I think, I've been working with alchemy for 35 years now. So it's a big difference. I started at the university. It was so strange to work with alchemy and take alchemy into the university. And then people thought it was very, very odd. But now people are quite, interested and have much more understanding and wisdom during the last 15 years, I think. So what do you think? Do they come and want to do the outer or inner? I don't know.
No, I think we are quite lucky with many students we have throughout the years, and they are as excited to whatever we are presenting, and we say, okay, now this weekend will be we will all do manifest our understanding into elixirs, and they say, wow, wonderful. Next time, yeah, okay, we were going to work with this alchemical stone as a stage of consciousness to be manifested. Wow, wonderful. So I think the people that don't come to our courses and workshops, they are much more, well, I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's not alchemy, because I don't see them doing this, or I don't see them doing that. But those people never come to lectures, they never come to workshops, because their idea of alchemy, they can't get it to resonate with the way we present alchemy. And it's also a protectionist aspect to it, and I think every tradition has that regardless of Western or Eastern traditions, whether esoteric or exoteric traditions, if you have one way of presenting and doing it, you know, you have at least 100 or 1,000 different ways of presenting it and teaching it, and people become protectionist of their own way of how they were taught or the way they understand it, and they quite often don't want to merge.
But also, it's not a big country, or not many people in Sweden, so it's not been, you know, we have different alchemical educations. This is what Sweden have right now. So, but another thing that is important, it's we want to teach and alchemy in a non-dogmatic way, because we find it very important that it's an experimental tradition. So you have to experiment with the tradition, with the wisdom, with the herbs, or with your subtle bodies, and then you will see what that will lead to. So it's a Gnostic tradition in that way. You have to get your own insights, you have to get your own heart aflame, and experiment and see what happens. And in that way, we use imagination a lot, like the star of the soul. And when you work in your inner, or the room between the inner and outer with imagination, you can see that you work with your karma, and things outside in your cosmic drama, outside world, will change. Not because we say it's very good with alchemy, but because they do the works and work with the energies and the inner drama. And then they can see, oh, this is the result because of experiment. And we also say we can do experiment. It doesn't have to go well. So that's another thing. You can fail. And if you have, you know, homework, please come and fail, but get your heart into it. Be creative and try, and then we will see what happens. And we don't work with this like Nordenskiöld, so we don't work with this big oven that will explode. So you can, in that way, try a little bit more. So it's not, you know, this or that way you should do it. It's a Gnostic experimental way. And I think that is why alchemy is so fun, at least for me, because you can be creative, and you can even utveckla? Develop. Every person develop the alchemical tradition when we work together, or each one of us. So it's that's important.
And I think what I thought about when you were explaining this is that every alchemical workshop and lecture, etc., we have will be different depending on the audience, because it needs to be this collaboration between the egregore of the tradition, our understanding, which obviously is different today than it was yesterday, and the people listening to it and trying to integrate it into their own lives. So even though we have the same blueprint, we never have two lectures that are, I would say, not even similar. They're quite dissimilar. And we have noticed that now when we we have a 3-year course in alchemy, and we have also that as an option to go online and take that course. So we recorded a lecture one day, and then 1 week later we have that same lecture with the group that we are working together with, and it became a completely different lecture. So it needs to take that into consideration also, that we're not teaching a dogma, we are teaching and trying to convey keys where each practitioner can utilize that depending on where they are in their life, and focus on the most important aspects in their life. And that's the way we wrote the book. We wrote it really or it became the book that we wanted to be able to read 25, 30 years ago. It wasn't available, so we had to go the extremely long path, and we had to do many trials and errors, both with outward practices and with inward practices. And then when we met in 2005, I came from a tradition of alchemy and magic in esoteric secret societies, and Katarina came from a more background in drama and theater. So during 1 year we met once every week for 3.5 to 4 hours and argued. Most of the times, after 3 hours of arguing about certain things, any one of us just realized, oh, when you are speaking about the sun, are you actually meaning this? I say, yeah, of course, the sun is this. Oh, no, because the sun is that for me. And we realized that, okay, we have been trained and learned how to incorporate and utilize the alchemical symbols, but from 2 different traditions, and from an outward perspective, they are in conflict, until we realize that it's only our way of interpreting the symbols that are different. But that's also why you can read 10 different alchemy books, regardless of when they were written, and they will not say the same thing. They will say, one say that salt is the body, and another book will say, no, salt is the soul. And I'm sure there is a third one that will say salt is the spirit. And so from an outward perspective, they seem to be in conflict, but that's just the way they were being taught and learned how to utilize it. But there is an underlying pattern that is unifying and is actually speaking about the same thing. But that's one of the trickeries in alchemy. And that's why we were asked with the Swedish edition that can't you just have a glossary at the end of the book? Okay, this alchemical term equals this. And I said, well, that's what we did with the book. But each term, each alchemical term takes a chapter to define. To not only convey the philosophical idea, but also to give implications of how this can be utilized and experimented with, so that consciousness, soul, body, and spirit can live in it. Then we can't have this always means that.
Fascinating. I think you mentioned before, perhaps people are getting wiser. They're coming to you better informed. I'm sure your work has something to do with that also. This book, Alchemy, the Divine Work, and your website, actually, your Academy website is full of very clear and well thought out, well crafted language. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and hopefully the English section of that website will be much, much improved very, very soon. So it's a balance between the Swedish one and the English one. Yeah, we have some work to do there. Okay. We can take some elixir in between, so cheers.
Yeah, cheers. I'm out of elixir, I'm afraid. Oh, I've got a little drop left. Cheers. So, right. Okay, I have one more, I suppose, geeky historical question before we turn a little bit more to application. And that is, you mentioned again.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Is in the dark?
No,
Like...
no.
I'm always in the dark.
Känns som du är så, komma fram lite.
Okay.
Yeah. You mentioned the influence of Greek philosophy. And in the book, you use the fresco by Raphael, The School of Athens,
yes.
which I've seen in the Vatican. Actually, I've seen it there. It's quite striking, with Aristotle pointing to the earth and Plato pointing to the heavens. And you make a very interesting point about that. I'm wondering if you might say something more about the influence of Greek philosophy on the alchemical tradition. What did it bring to it, and its different schools? What did they bring, and how were they perhaps in turn influenced by that contact themselves?
Well, I think the most obvious ones is our understanding of the four philosophical elements, how everything is composed out of fire, water, air, and earth, and the quintessence of that being the ether. So that is very traceable, but we also see the Greek philosophers trying to understand what is the true origin of everything. What is the prima materia? And some philosophers said it must be fire, and others said no, it must be water. And is it? And we have the whole idea of the atom. How do you pronounce it?
How do you spell it?
Atom, the nuclear, what's it called?
Nucleus.
Oh, atom.
Yeah, atom.
Yeah.
You see many ideas of alchemy tracing it back to the Greek philosophers, trying to understand what could be the first element of creation. And from the Christian perspective, they would say that the first element is light. And you have other alchemists that also argue that, yeah, the first is the lux, it's the divine light. And from the divine light, we have light and darkness. We have the division and duality of creation. And from that duality, we have the three alchemical principles, and from those three alchemical principles we have the four philosophical elements, and then we have the tetractus of the Greek philosophers. So they were obviously, alchemists were extremely impressed and influenced by the Greek philosophers, and continue that idea of trying to understand both within and without how creation came to be.
Yeah, and if you also go back to like Pythagoras, you can see he was an alchemist, I would say, because he thought to get a map over the consciousness, or the different levels of consciousness, like we have now in the string theory. He was the one, to start that movement, that we can go from one consciousness to another. And the mathematics see that we have these constants in the universe, that when we go into these archetypes, we can understand and see beyond the wheel, before creation. So in many ways, the early philosophers in Greece were alchemist, I would say. And we also have to remember, before we go further in history, that a true philosopher is someone loving Sophia. That's the meaning of the word. And philosophy in history has been this logos-oriented tradition. But in the beginning, if you don't give yourself to the goddess Sophia, or the alchemical goddess Sophia, you can't get these clues or go behind this wheel. So alchemy and the early philosophers were very similar, and we have alchemists in the philosophical tradition as well.
And I think when we see the Greek philosophers, and obviously it's very exemplified by Plato and Aristotle, where no, the truth is up there. No, the truth is down here. It's here our focus. No, that's the world of ideas. That's the true essence. And alchemists say, yeah, it is both. And all other Greek philosophers are sort of in an interplay between the above and the below that Plato and Aristotle is really separated. So for modern alchemists, all Greek philosophers are extremely beneficial to study and contemplate and meditate upon, because they all carry gems of truth without anyone being able to claim the title of the truth.
Fascinating. Thank you. And I think one of the bridges between what we're talking about here, this historical, and the philosophy and application, although it's sort of almost constantly both anyway, is the cosmogony, the alchemical ideas of how things came to be. You've hinted at that, and you go into that in quite some detail in certain chapters of the book. I wonder if you might say something about the way in which cosmogony is viewed in the alchemical, or has been viewed in the alchemical traditions.
Yes.
I think it's running through the whole book. So it's not so easy to, just pinpoint. But when we talked about this polarity that started creation, it's also this from the unity and then this duality. And as Tommy said, then we have the three principles and the four. So that's the ground and the foundation, this tetractys, through all the alchemical work, I think. What's interesting is when you want to come back to source or oneness or the whole, you can do it by combining the four elements and get the fifth element, the quintessentia, the quintessence. But you can also do it by combining the three principles, salt, sulfur, and mercury, and also get an alchemical wedding. Or you can work with the polarities. So that's why it's not, you can do it in many different ways. And it can be a small alchemical wedding, or it can be the alchemical wedding. But every time you get back to oneness or source or this primordial light, it's an alchemical wedding. And that's what the whole book is trying to convey, the history and philosophy, and then how to do it to be one with source again.
And I think our personal view is that alchemy is really a philosophical system and understanding, and can be applied to any kind of religion or science, and has been applied to any kind of religious or scientific ideas and beliefs. And I think if we utilize very much of the Christian tradition, we also utilize very much of the Gnostic tradition, of the Egyptian tradition and the Greek tradition. But another way of explaining alchemy for a modern person today who may be an atheist is that everything started from this primordial matter, aeons and aeons and aeons ago. And this primordial matter, that was the prima materia of everything, contained everything as a possibility, but hadn't been manifested. So this point sort of this point withdrew into itself until it exploded and created the universe, created creation. So this prima materia is the star dust that we billions years later are a manifestation of. So from that alchemical understanding, we are all here because of this alchemical transformations and transmutations that has not only developed stars and star systems and planets, but also living beings and the huge miracle of consciousness, which science cannot explain what it is or how it, why it came into. There are different ideas, and certain of those ideas may actually be better described from religious or ideas or other philosophical ideas. But we can see that we now are running very fast through the space on this tiny planet as an alchemical huge experiment, trying to understand our position in creation, in the cosmos, and our relationship between everything else. So that's another way of describing how everything started from one singularity and manifested in duality through the three principles and the four elements.
And we can also do it quite easy because it's a fundamental principle that we haven't been talking about yet, and that is the principle of love. And then you can see if you have this primordial source or Godhead that is love. If you don't express the love, it will be self-love, and then it can't be this all-encompassing love. So just you have love, and love want to express, and then we have creation. So that's also I think an important principle to emphasize in alchemy. We have this secret fire going through the alchemical divine work, and this secret is the principle of love, actually, and how we get to know this principle and how we unite with the divine love, and then how we can express and transform this earth to Gaia being the philosopher's stone or the stone of the wise. So it can be quite, simple also sometimes, alchemy, if we just come back to love.
And some Greek philosophers would agree with that.
The love of Sophia.
When you mention those various traditions, I think of Gnosticism and its various manifestations, and one or a couple of points of variation in those different ideas of Gnosticism is the earth or matter, this, fundamentally a good thing or a bad thing? Is the soul, the person, fundamentally a good thing or a bad, or life fundamentally a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a prison or a paradise? Is the soul inside good or bad? How does alchemy see that particular matrix? It's a matrix, I think, that's used sometimes to analyze the Gnostic traditions, and particularly and other dualistic religions too, like Manichaeism and so on.
Alchemy has a very positive view of creation, and because the fundament is also that the body or the matter and the soul and the spirit are all same things. It's just different expressions on different levels of consciousness. So that's why the earth or the body can't be negative, because it's the same spirit, just expressed differently. So that's why alchemy has this positive view on creation, and also on the human possibility to transform earth to this stone of the wise. But when we speak about Gnostic traditions, it's a very big, difference between them. We have this negative view of creation, and they want to explode the earth, and we have this tradition that sees that it's not fundamental a duality. We work with dualities, but in the end, all is one. So it's not easy when you say Gnostic, you know.
Obviously, alchemy is much more related to the Hermetic tradition and the corpus hermeticum in various ways. We do include Gnostic work because even though we here in Sweden, we are probably the least religious country in the world, we still have the archetypes of Christianity that we were brought up with, and we have the Protestant tradition that is not always positive in relation to how to view humanity and humanity's ability to come to know and unite with divinity or the Godhead. So the Gnostic traditions are extremely useful to utilize in seeing that things that we have been brought up with, that we have never questioned because we don't consider ourselves to be religious people. Okay, well, 1,500 years ago or 2,000 years ago, they actually turned everything on a plate and said that, well, the Adam and Eve didn't sin. That was an apocalypse that they gained consciousness. So the serpent wasn't an instrument for evil or the devil. That was something that brought about an awakening. And then we start realizing that we have all seen the children books when we were small, and we are so old, so we actually had to go to churches, especially over Christmas and certain holidays, and so much of that.
Not me, but okay.
You went to churches
when I was small, no? Hardly not. But I was grown up in a very non-spiritual family, so
okay.
But in school, yeah.
In school.
Anyway.
So then the Gnostic traditions can actually be a way for us to understand that we are still ruled or controlled by certain patterns going generations and generations back. And it's not conscious for us because we don't consider ourselves religious or Christians in that sense, but we're still governed by them or inspired in the best sense, but more probably it creates some idea of division within ourselves, that there was something bad with the first man and woman, and that's why we're all living in sin. And of course, alchemy in the when you read alchemy books in the 15 and 1600s, they had to spend the first majority of the book trying to explain that matter is not bad. You have the burning bush in the Old Testament. You have God manifesting itself through various materialized ways to talk with human beings. So matter can't be bad in itself. And we see that they had to spend 50 or 100 pages on a book to explain that to people that then were being taught by the church that the body was awful. You can't do things with your body because then you're going to sin, and the only thing you can do is pray to God, and perhaps you will come to an afterlife, or otherwise you will come to other places beyond death. And there was really nothing more you can do with it. So it was used as a way to imprison people, to make suffering explainable, and the possibility of an eventual relief, perhaps. And although we are not taught in that same way, we still have these archetypes in the Western consciousness about the original sin and fall, etc., etc.
But I just want to say now also that we also work with the Christian tradition. So even though we work with the Gnostic and Egyptians, we also work a lot with the Christian tradition and see the whole Bible with alchemical glasses. And then we can see that the story with Jesus and Mary Magdalene, from the beginning to end, convey the whole alchemical opus magnum. So it's not, we are not pro or against any religion or tradition. We use them as living gospels and living metaphors that we can gain insight and gain knowledge from. And then we can do it with Gnostic, Christian, Eastern, whatever. That is a good way to describe transformation of human being and transformation of life, actually.
I agree.
Because well, it's easy, to look at this dogmatic, but yeah. We love the esoteric tradition in every religion, actually.
We do.
We do.
We do.
This has been so fascinating. Thank you. You mentioned before a sort of stage of darkness where the practitioner may have many doubts and may become quite depressed, may even lose connection to the inspiration of the path and this sort of thing. And that's one of several stages you outline in the book that the alchemist moves through. I wonder if you might give a sense of these stages and the progression through them. This idea of passing through stages, of course, it's in many traditions, many religious and contemplative traditions, and particularly this stage of a dark night, so to say. It seems to be a recurring idea. Could you say something about the stages the alchemist goes through as you describe them in your book?
Yes.
Yes, we can just start with saying that we haven't been speaking about it now, but the book and the magnum opus is, we have these 4 different stages. We go from the black to the white, to the yellow, to the red. It's nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, and rubedo. And when every phase are going to another stage or another phase, we have these dark nights, we can say. Yeah.
But I think before going into the 4 stages, we have one common factor that I think anyone can recognize, and that's the in alchemy it's called the mercurial fire. It's when we are completely filled with passion, with lust, with love. We want to explore this new wonderful tradition. We want to understand tarot cards or alchemy, or we want to understand the meditation techniques, or this, or astrology, or that, or geomancy, or ritual magic, whatever. And we believe that this, I've read some books about it, I've seen some documentaries. Oh, this is the key to the mysteries. So we are filled with this complete pure passion or alchemical fire that is necessary for us to actually take this huge step out into the unknown, or within into our unknown. So we start reading, we start learning the basic practices and principles. We start learning how to meditate, and we start learning some alchemical symbols and trying to integrate them, and we just feel, oh, this is wonderful. I don't know everything yet, but I can really see how this will change my life forever. And sooner or later, that will turn into the complete opposite. Once we're filled with this passion, with love, with lust, we suddenly feel that I'm just aching. The body's aching, my soul is aching, my spirit is being bored, or I can't even feel or sense my spirit any longer. And that's when we enter into this negredo state, the black state or stage in alchemy, where we have to look within ourselves and see everything within ourselves that we have tried to escape from. And sadly, most of the times when we start esoteric work or esoteric practices, we want to escape from the person we are or the person we have become in relationship to parents, to our environment, because we want to see something else. We want to see beyond the veils. We want to open ourselves to creation, and then we are stuck in the prisons within, where nothing has a positive effect any longer. Everything that happened yesterday or a week before or the months before, now I can't sense divinity. I can't sense this passion within me. The only thing I feel or see is darkness, and you feel completely alone.
We can feel it.
And I think everyone who's listening to this has been through that, because it doesn't matter what kind of esoteric tradition we emerge into, we will sooner or later realize that we have to open or ignite ourselves from the within. And the only thing we see then is the darkness that we have tried to suppress through ages and generations, perhaps. But if we endure, if we believe in our teacher or tutor or in the tradition or in the divine, we may be able to light up this darkness and see, because the darkness serves a purpose. It wants us to ask the questions: who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? What's beyond life? Is death the end? What's, from the alchemical perspective, what's the meaning of nature? How do I collaborate with other human beings? How do I collaborate with divinity if I believe in divinity?
And that's the first dark night. And we call it the dark night of the mind, because it's mostly that you have to expand and see that that's more than this material world we are living in. That's more to life than go to work, and Tommy expressed it so well here. It's more to life. So that's when the mind have to broke apart to get in touch with this little spirit light we have within. And we can find it first in this darkness as we go down deeper in a dark sea, and then we can see little lights that are the foundation to the problems we have in this life. And one important thing is this, that we think this is it, this is the end, but it's so much more. And when that comes through, we can go through this dark night of the mind and get to the next stage, that is the albedo, the white phase, where we start to see spirit, where we start to reach out for the divine, that where everything is possible. It's this where you start to work with tarot and angels and spirits, and you can do everything, astral travels and so on. So you go up from earth to see all that is around you. But we have a problem even here in this white phase, albedo, that is, you want to leave the darkness, you want to leave the earth, you want to leave the people that are bad or not good. So it's get a very big separation between good and evil. And when this separation breaks apart, you can say, then you get into the dark night of the soul, the famous now one. You know it from St. John of the Cross and lots of Eastern traditions expression also. So then the soul almost dies. All that you have gained through your work, through your meditations, and all you have done has to die. It's like your soul is dying, and you can't see anything of light in this dark night of the soul. And the only positive thing about it, I think, it's mostly not just 1 year or 10 years or 1 month. It comes and goes. And that's why we can see we walk up and down through on this Jacob's ladder. When we walk up, we see the light. When we walk down, we get humility and go down to earth again and feel this darkness. And then we have to go up and down all the way until we get to be a servant of divine.
Yes, and obviously you emphasize more the darkened aspects of this white face.
You so?
I think because when we enter into the white face of albedo, it's liberation. We are completely free from matter. We're not trapped in our body. We're not trapped in our mind. We have the possibilities to explore everything within and without. And when people get stuck in the first black phase of Nigredo, they tend to go into they start to abuse drugs or abuse certain things to avoid the big questions. What am I? What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of everything I do? So they actually stop doing any kind of esoteric work. Whereas in the white wonderful phase, they also stop doing work within a tradition when they start sensing that there is even darkness in this light phase, but that darkness must be because of this tradition. So I'm choosing another tradition and I go through the same thing until I start sensing that there is darkness also there.
You were also dark.
Yeah, but I wanted to have the positive.
We wanted to come to the dark nights.
I wanted to have the positive as well.
Yeah.
But the white face of albedo is really
blissful.
And you really see the golden dawn. It's the dawn of creation. It's the dawn of humanity, and you want to explain this dawn to every one of your friends. You start YouTube channels, you start having workshops, lectures, explaining this to other people, because that's part of your learning process. And in alchemy, that's really far beyond the end of it, because now you have the soul and spirit working very much, and you can obviously have the logos aspect and the Sophia aspect, but it's really about transcending matter, transcending the body, and then you ground yourself and okay, now I've done this meditation or I've done this ritual, and now I continue with my life. But in alchemy, we have the yellow phase of Citrinitas, where this soul that has united and married spirit, and as Katarina said, that can only happen if the soul actually gives up and dies, which is the dark night of the soul, to become a soul spirit. Then you could see that many exoteric traditions say that, well, you're done. That's perfect. Now you can just live and fly with the angels and wait for this physical life to end.
So in that way, it's a more of a bodhisattva ideal, the alchemical tradition. Now you have to go back to earth. You're not a bodhisattva at this stage, but it's the ideal that you have to come back all the time to earth. So we have the Citrinitas stage, yeah.
And then you have the soul spirits symbolically descending into matter, into the body, to start transforming the body from within to without, so that there will again be a union and meeting between soul, spirit, and body, or soul, spirit, and matter. a huge transformation process, and we can see those indications in both Western and Eastern traditions, in various tantric traditions or sexual magic traditions, where the body is actually utilized, and you can sense how many energy currents that can be vivified or enlivened by the soul spirit, and especially if you're working with another person or within a context where you as a human work with divinity. It's really to regenerate the body and start the transformation and transmutation process. But it's not even ending there. And the big difference between the first two, black and white phase, and this third and coming fourth phase, is that the first two tends to be more microcosmic. It's within me. Everything is within me. And obviously that's not a problem, because do I need to explore the universe? Yeah, I can do that in my mind. Everything is contained within me. Whereas in the Citrinitas, the yellow phase, and the red phase of Libido, we can't only work with the microcosm. We have to include the macrocosm realities in our work.
And then it's quite interesting, because when you work with negative energies, you always want to know, is it mine, or is it a projection, or where does it come from? But in the Citrinitas phase, it doesn't matter. It's a negative energy, and someone has to do it. So it can be me if I'm capable. So it's a big shift in that way. From you have learned this projection, but even if there is a projection or if it's not a projection, it doesn't matter, because someone has to do the transformation. Because in alchemy, nothing is bad per se, because everything is energy. And if we try to get away with the negative energy or the dark energy or the evil, we lose energy. So we try to transform and transfigurate the energy all the time. And in this yellow phase, we do it even for others. It doesn't matter. So that's why it's also a collective work in a much more broader sense, you can say. But we have to come to the end before it's closing time here.
Okay, yeah. And the more you actually incorporate the soul spirit and have it work within the body as your temple from within to without, then truly realizing that it's no different. The outside and the inside are complete true mirrors of themselves. So if I do good deeds but I have impure thoughts, then that will be completely infectious. And in the white phase of albedo, we realize that if I do something or if I don't do something, that will affect consciousness. Whereas in Citrinitas, you have to be responsible for your thoughts. It's not only your actions, but your thoughts and emotions will either impregnate the light or the darkness, you could say. So it becomes even more important to understand how the soul has both the light and the dark aspects to it, the positive and the negative sides to it. So the projections become a huge learning tool, that every time we see something in another being, we realize that that doesn't say anything about that person. It only says something about me, what I have to focus and work within, either to emphasize a light aspect or purify a dark aspect within me, so that we can go from the yellow to marry the whole of creation in the red phase, where we symbolically want to give birth to a new stage of consciousness, or a new state of consciousness. And this we go into quite detail about in the book, the various states of consciousness, but that can perhaps be we can do in a
This was a short
following podcast.
Yeah.
But the red work is about the manifestation of your understanding, of your ideas. It's for us, the red work was partly publishing the book. That becomes then the prima materia of the reader that can take the gems from the book, not as a dogma, but only what works for that person, and start their own or continue their alchemical journey. So everything gives birth to something else in a continuous ebb and flow of creation.
So this red phase or rubedo is also, in the end, when it's more manifest, it's a solar body or the golden body. So here we have the gold in the end. And it's the same as this immortal body or diamond body. It's the consciousness that are whole, and you can, through it, go through different levels of creation without going into sleep or vad heter det? Glömska. Forgetfulness. So it's awakened consciousness that are whole. That's why it's not subject to separation and distortion. This was the end.
and the beauty, the way we see it, is that just going with these 4 alchemical phases and the mercurial fire, you can apply them to any kind of aspect of your life, either as your journey throughout life, where we become more and more conscious and about ourselves and the way we interact with creation, or with any kind of creative project, has to go through and will go through these same 4 phases. So just to summarize that, if you're writing a book or painting a picture, painting, you have this divine inspiration. You have an idea of what you want to do, and you start collecting the necessary material for it. And the more you collect it and you start work, and it's the first sentence of the book. How do I start the first sentence of the book? And does the world really need another book? And you go through this darkness of questioning why you're doing that, and then in a dream you have this realization: the book will open like this, and you start writing the first sentence, and the first chapter just flows, or you have the painting and you're just starting to come alive, and it's just you can always sense the end product just quite early on, but it's just pure passion again. You're free from boundaries. And then you eventually come to the yellow stage, where it's not completed, but it's almost completed. So you have to do the most scaring thing you can do. You show it to another person and say, well, what do you think of it? The red here is rubedo, and the sun is gold, and you go like, could be centralized, and have you really and it's like a sword in your breast, because this is your pure baby you're showing to the first person in the world. And a thought or a word can kill this baby, and you're experiencing agony and doubt and fear again, until you realize that, okay, you actually had some good points. I can change that chapter. I could
so every sword is, a possibility to refine the work within and with the project. So that's why we have also the likeness of Herodes with the child, killing the child in the Bible, is the same thing. We kill all our childs within, but we have one child left that no one can kill, and that is the divine child. And it's the same. You can get all this criticism and so on, but when you feel that this is my soul manifested, I get it out. It doesn't matter what everyone thinks. So that is the end product, or the red phase in the opus.
And then it takes on a life. of its own. Like any creative work, whether books, paintings, music, whatever, and then each listener or reader are able and free to interpret it in their own ways. And that's wonderful, beautiful, and scary.
Hope it's possible to understand a little bit about this divine work.
Yes, so fascinating and so beautifully explained. Thank you both. This has been great. We must do a sequel. I'll petition you now for a sequel. There's still many things we could cover. For example, the practices that you describe in the book, contemplation, meditation, and imagination, and so on. And that's so fascinating. And I think we could have a very interesting discussion about that. And I'm also curious, we didn't get to it, about your own journeys in this material. Maybe that's an interesting theme as well. But anyway, congratulations, I'd like to finish by saying, on the publication of the English version of Alchemy, the Divine Work. Available now, it's really quite a read. Well done. And Katarina Falkenberg and Tommy Westlund, thank you very much.
Thank you
so much.
So happy to meet you also. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.